All right, I decided I'm going to talk a little bit about snow rain and earthquake, a massive avalanche cycle that happened in Tajikistan and Afghanistan this February. This is kind of the light. I took this slot of the day because this is when everyone is starting to fall asleep because you just had lunch, your bellies are full, and you're starting to nod off. So I figure, all right, we're just going to go pure entertainment here, and I'm just going to tell some stories and show some pictures. This right here, this is a few homes that were taken out in an avalanche in 2009, killed 12 people, came down off this hill right here. Unlike in the U.S. where people get killed because they're skiing, snowmobiling, they're recreating, as most avalanche fatalities. Same thing with Europe, a lot of other, Canada. In this part of the world, people die because they're purely victims. They're getting taken out in their homes. They're hurting their animals. They get killed. They're driving a road. They get swept into the river. So it's much more of a seriousness. They're not choosing to go in avalanche terrain. They're born in avalanche terrain, and so they have to live there. I work for a group called the Aga Khan Agency for Habitat, and they do disaster relief. So, floods, earthquakes, landslides, and avalanches. And so I help train them on avalanches and also do some avalanche forecasting. This is the area that Aga works in right here, which is the intersection of three major mountain ranges. We've got the Pamirs, the Hindu Kush, and the Karakoram, and that's all in northern Afghanistan, southern Tajikistan, and northern Pakistan. The area that we're going to talk about here, this is Afghanistan, Tajikistan, Pakistan. We're going to talk about the helmet here in Afghanistan, and this finger is called the Wakhan Corridor. And then southern Tajikistan. This is where most of the action happened with this last storm cycle. So, quick little 2-minute video explaining what Akka does. So the landscape over there is quite big because you've got the biggest mountains in the world, and it also has some of the biggest avalanche paths. Some of the avalanche paths are about 6,000 feet vertical. And in areas like this, you can see wherever it's green, a lot of it's irrigated, and you have these villages right where the water comes out, which is in these drainages, and it's in the runout zone. And so they have where they live, where they graze. Everything is a lot of times in the runout zones because that's where you actually have vegetation where you can herd your animals, you can feed them, and you have some water. a lot of times, if you're looking at a 100-year avalanche cycle or so, we're talking a lot of generations go by, before anyone is like, oh yeah, this is a really dangerous spot. Afghanistan was a war zone since 2001. Actually, it was a war zone well before that too, with the Russians and Taliban. Made it really difficult to work in. It's kind of difficult and dangerous. And also in Tajikistan is a lot safer, and it's definitely more sane than Afghanistan. And Tajikistan was one of the republics of the USSR up until 95, when there was a civil war and they gained their independence. So those two countries are the ones we're going to be talking about. This is a picture taken from the vehicle, and we're driving in Tajikistan, and across the river, that little dirt road, that's Afghanistan. And this kind of sums up the difference between the two countries, because in Tajikistan, we've got pavement, we've got concrete, we have power lines. Across the river, you have none of those things. Or you do in the cities, you don't in a lot of the places. So they're at a complete disadvantage. It is almost like when you look across the river, you're looking back in time, a few hundred years. It's quite unbelievable. So I started work for ACA in 2012. There was a huge avalanche cycle that happened, killed 148 people. And they reached out because they said, we need help. We know all these people are dying. And so this is a gas station right here in the green. And in 2012, that was wiped away. That was completely gone because this path all went and just took it out. And that was in 2012. In 2013, they rebuilt it. And there it is. So there's no zoning over there. It's kind of like, and we try and get people to not build where buildings have been destroyed. In 2014, so 2 years later, a large avalanche came down in this village, Anurs, the village named Nurs. The avalanche came from way up in here. It killed 22 people, 8 of them children. And so ACA said, enough's enough, like we need an avalanche forecasting program. We need an avalanche safety program. And so that's when I started putting out weekly avalanche forecasts. I was traveling over there in the summers to do some trainings, teaching people, what does it even look like when do we know the danger is getting bad? What should we do? How can we do a rescue? How do we stay safe? The problem was for forecasting is we had no weather data. There's no weather stations over there. And I started with the basics, which is, my God, can't we just give someone a ruler? Like, I need to know how much it snowed. Like, that's all I really need to know to start. Like, did it snow a meter or did it snow 5 centimeters? And so we started with that basic premise of, can we give a guy a ruler? And the answer was yes, we can give people rulers. And so we made these little weather stations. They're manual weather stations. And we gave them basically a ruler, and to where they could measure some really simple parameters. There's 15 of these in Afghanistan. There's 21 in Tajikistan. And we put these weather stations in the most vulnerable areas, meaning they're areas that have been hit by avalanches, they've had fatalities, they're high up in the valleys to where we're getting reasonable measurements. And every day, a person is measuring total snow depth, new snow, maximum temperatures, and then if there's been any avalanche activity. They write it all down and then they call it in, and they're calling it in either on a satellite phone, on a cell phone, or over a radio to the country's kind of main office. They type it into a website, and every morning I get to see it, see what happened. And then I can make a very basic kind of forecast. This is Nurs, the village that got hit with that avalanche, killed 22 people. We put a weather station there. There's a short 1-minute video on that station by the guy who takes the weather.
فدا حسین هستم، مسئول پوسته نظارت از هوا به هوا مؤسسه آقاخان برای اسکان، باشنده قریه نیرس ولسوالی آقاخان ولایت بدخشان. مدت 6 سال می شود که در این بست کار میکنیم به حیث رضاکارانه و روزانه ساعت 8 صبح گزارش سرعت باد، بلندترین درجه حرارت و پایینترین درجه حرارت، اندازه برف، دیگه درجه باران رو چک میکنیم و به دفتر مرکزی گزارش میدیم. باز دفتر مرکزی طبق گزارش ما معلومات به ما ارائه میکنه که تا از خطر برف‌پوش در امان باشه.
So pretty basic living out there. Okay, on February 12th, I was putting out an avalanche forecast, and this is a weather model, a WRF model that John Snook, who used to work for Ethan at CIC, built for me. And this is, you can see the outlines of the countries here. Here's Afghanistan. And so I'm going to run this model for you real quick. And the scale is white is over 40 inches of snow. So we ran this model for the next week. I knew storms were coming. But I saw that and I kind of freaked out because that's a lot of snow over most of Central Asia. And I was like, okay, well, it's going to snow a lot and we're going to see a lot of avalanches. I found out that that white wasn't just like 40 inches, it's 40 plus inches. Well, that plus was, you could measure it in meters. So meters of snow fell high in these elevations. You go, well, how do you know meters of snow fell? Well, I know because we put up these snow masts outside of these villages where each color represents 1 meter of snow. All the way down in the village down below is a guy with a spotting scope. And so once a day, if there's visibility, he goes out and he looks and he's like, yup, there's 1.5 meters of snow up in that starting zone. And so we've got these all over. And when the storm ended, I'm looking at the data and I'm seeing a bunch of zeros, you know, on where the snow mass depth should be. And I'm thinking, those guys, like, they're being lazy, really. They're kind of slacking because they don't want to go outside. I mean, it's kind of been brutal. And so I talked to them. I talked to the people taking the recordings, and I'm like, what's up with this no one recording snow mass depth? And they go, oh, sir, they're all buried. They're gone. They're just covered in snow. So we knew it was 3 meters minimum up in the starting zones that fell, you know, pretty quickly. Avalanches, we put out an avalanche alert. We knew they were coming. Aka, what they did was, as soon as I put out the alert, they immediately started doing in-person warnings. They were going to schools, they're going to homes, they're letting people know, they're sending out texts, they're putting it on social media, and they're saying it in all the mosques. So they're telling people like, hey man, like, now's the time to kind of not be doing things. And we're warning people to stay inside, to don't walk to the next village, don't get in your car and go somewhere, don't wander outside and feed your animals, stay put. And this was the time when we started to evacuate people. And because some of the villages that have homes that are in the paths that we know about, we're evacuating them out of there. So 1,024 homes were evacuated within just a couple days. And again, Aka, they've worked in these areas for years, so people knew it was coming. They knew what to do. Where do they go when they evacuate? Because there's real issues, especially in Afghanistan, where it's even more rural. Like if you're leaving your house, it's like, well, who's watching your animals? You know, and so there's some real kind of cultural problems that they have to kind of surmount. With that, we evacuated 1,024 homes. 5 of those homes got center punched and completely destroyed, but there was no one in them. So we chalked that up to a win, you know, because each household is anywhere from 12 to 15 people, you know, live in a household. So it's a fair number of folks. Afghanistan made these pamphlets that they handed out. They made these in the fall, and then they handed them out, when the storm hit. And it kind of cracked me up because, they're like, yeah, swimming, because they're asking me like, well, what do you do? They're like, oh, swimming motion. There's a guy who's freaking doing the freestyle right down the debris. You got the, hand out of the snow. And then down here is like, when they close the roads, they're saying like, hey, like when the road's closed, like it's closed, like you're not allowed to go there. And I gotta say that this is where authoritative regimes really shine, because they're like, you're not going on this road. People are like, we're not going on that road. They listen. This is the day the storm's starting. They send me this picture. They're like, we're ready, sir. We are so ready for this. And I'm like, oh my God, this is not good, But the deal is this is a community emergency response team, and every village has one. And these people, they're trained. I mean, they've got first aid. They've listened to the Avalanche lectures. They've got the gear. I mean, and what's so funny is when you give them gear, like they wear it. Like, the hard hat's on all the time. I mean, if you got a headlamp, it's on your hat. It's on your helmet. But even though I got this picture and I kind of laughed, these people saved lives. I mean, it worked. It was unbelievable, the work that they did. Highly motivated. Okay, it starts snowing. Snow's coming. It's like, okay, here it comes. And oh my God, did it snow. It snowed and snowed. And 9 straight days of snowfall. At a minimum, there was a meter in the valleys, 3 meters up high. Basically, it was like having a Tahoe-like snowstorm on an intercontinental snowpack. And, we had the snowpack fell onto the snow fell onto a snowpack that was weak from depth hoar. And so we had widespread avalanches all over. They're searching for 2 people that were walking a road when this avalanche hit. It's a grainy photo. It came from a WhatsApp message. Here, there was a home here, and so they're looking for a house. Killed 5 people. Our weather monitoring posts had 593 avalanches that were reported, that someone had reported. God only knows how many hundreds more we never heard about. And mid-storm, this picture was sent to me. And they're like, yeah, digging out some avalanches. And I'm like, this is an interesting picture. I noticed this here, these round lobes of debris. And I'm like, that looks wet. Like you see that with wet slides. And then I see this is the guy in the umbrella. And I'm like, I write him back. I'm like, is it raining? And they're like, oh, yes, sir, it's raining. And where we have the weather monitoring post, there are higher elevations and they weren't reporting the rain. But down lower, we were getting rain. And so it rained about 3 inches of water in 2 days. You can see more umbrellas in this picture as they're digging out the wet debris. Many low elevation slides, they hit homes, they're buried the roads. Once you're burying the road, you can't get rescuers in. It's just, people are kind of on their own. Really put a lot of pressure on the community emergency response teams, those people we saw at the beginning, because they're working around the clock. There's no rest. They're just hitting it. Then the flooding started. And so then all of a sudden we had lots of flooding where homes were being flooded out. I don't know if anyone died from the flooding, but it certainly made a mess of things. We had rivers in these villages, entire roads were washed out. And still these avalanches were coming down. In this picture, they're digging down to try and find the roof of a house. And so they know there's a house in there somewhere and they're digging for it. In all, 84 homes were either destroyed or damaged, and that included 1 school as well. So pretty widespread destruction, and people died. They were digging out a body here. 38 people died and 35 people were injured. And then livestock were killed. 333 livestock were killed. And livestock is where all their wealth resides. You know, it's not in the stock market, it's not in savings accounts or cash, it's in their animals. And so when their herd dies, it's the equivalent of like a stock market crash. Like you're losing your life's, you know, wealth right there. So it's quite significant. And then an earthquake hit. So we had snow, we've got rain, and then kabam on the 16th, 4.7 magnitude earthquake hits right here in Faizabad, which is in the zone of where all this is kind of happening. I mean, it's a really active area for earthquakes anyway. 4.7 is not massive, but didn't help. We don't know what avalanches were triggered by snow or what were triggered by earthquakes. It didn't really matter at that point. It was just one more thing that these poor people have to deal with. Here they're cleaning this is the road crew. They're cleaning out a road here. And then this picture was taken from a road looking down on the river. And on the second day of the avalanche alert, when the kind of avalanches are happening, there's a big fuel truck in Afghanistan that's driving this dirt road, and it gets center punched by an avalanche, throws it down the hill into the river. 2 dudes killed. Well, once the storm broke, Aga Khan was like, well, we're going to go and try and find the bodies. And so they went out on the river. You can see the truck they yanked out in the foreground there. And this totally cracked me up, because this is their water rescue team. This is the Dave Zinn of Afghanistan right here. and these guys, yeah, they're the water rescue team. They're in a boat that belongs in a pool in the summer. I mean, and yet they're just out there just, you know, paddling away, trying to find these bodies. They don't know how to swim. You know, they're just tough. They're like, yeah, send me in, coach. Like, they're just going in. They're going to do whatever it takes to try and find them. Unfortunately, it didn't happen. They didn't find them. They searched the banks for 2 days, but they never did find the bodies. They just found this one boot. This is a 1:40 video. And this is video of, there was an avalanche came down, hit a house, killed this, or they thought killed this girl, little girl, and but they do CPR on her and they bring her back. And so the girl you see in the video survives. And supposedly what they said was they did throughout the whole week, they did CPR 6 separate times and brought people back. You know, and I'm like, whatever, that's pretty awesome. I mean, but this is a video of that.
دستش پیش مشاده برما کارما شما دوست درازن تلختا باش تلختا مزن بیده کلا بور
Она дышит, зачем ей массаж?
She lived. This next video is 2 minutes long. This shows an avalanche hit a house. And this shows the rescuers pulled the father and 2 kids out of the avalanche debris, and they both lived. And the roof collapsed on the kitchen, because you'll see them carrying these huge big beams, and that's the roof that came down on top of them.
زود باشه بچه زود باشه یالا یالا بلی گرم بده بچه بلا بده زود باش زود باش صبر کن یواش 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 تو که اولیا اینا بپره بخونه اونا بخونه بود تا ویدو سایی ویدو خرابه عجله نکن کمک اول زود باشه کاسش کنه کاسش خوش یاد کاسش کنه تا بخش اولا مواظب باشه مواظب باش دیگه داره اینجا هست یا نه نه کجا تا بچه تذکیره رو بیاره ویدیو ایش نگید نگه نکنه چیزی دانه تو کار نکن میبیسی سریع بیا کازی ملو برا بیا یه بارش تو بونه بچه بود چاگه کار باشه کی بنده واسش کنه واسش کنه عجله.
So it worked. I mean, they saved these people's lives. It was unbelievable. Everyone in the orange vest with a little logo, they're community members. They're not like professional search and rescue. They're just community members that have been trained in first aid. They've been trained in some basic rescue, and they're able to save lives. I mean, it's just super cool. So 38 deaths, 35 injured, animals killed, homes destroyed. Afghanistan gave food and supplies to over almost 200,000 people in that 1 week span, a little over a week. Now, in 2012, 148 died, yet this year we had only 38 die in a much bigger and consequential avalanche cycle. This was huge compared to the one in 2012. Yet we had less fatalities, a lot less. And so, you know, we know a lot based on these alerts, evacuation, training, forecasting, you know, all helped keep these casualties low. Like 48 is still a big number, but given the size of the storm, if this was 2012, it probably would have been in the hundreds, you know, without this safety network in place that Aga Khan did. So that's, you know, it's working, which is kind of cool. And so I just want to thank, obviously, the Aga Khan Agency for Habitat, as well as Ron Simonhoys is working with Ethan at CIC. He's kind of my sounding board for a lot of problems that I come across. And then John Snook, who made the weather models for me years ago that I've been using. So that's it. we'll have one question.
How's the weather forecasting work over there?
Because of the Snooks model, it works reasonably well.
But they're not a government agency.
There are government, but they're really bad. They're just not. They're better for the cities, you know. But in terms of mountains, they're not. Yeah, they're not good at that at all.
Where do you get your input data from?
Oh, I'm not sure where John's getting it from. Ethan?
He's using the same thing that we do for weather forecasting here. They're hemispheric weather models, and then he uses them on the boundaries, and then the nested grid will solve it for the smaller area.
So this is kind of a cross-border area. Is this agency funded by different governments? How does that work?
Yeah, so the agency, ACA, is just an arm of this much larger nonprofit. And so they're funded by governments, donors. They're based in Geneva, is where their actual home office is. And the Aga Khan is a man. The Aga Khan is the spiritual leader of the Ismaili Muslims. And so he, starting in the 60s, he created the Aga Khan Foundation, the Aga Khan Development Network, and he does everything from building schools to hospitals to doing disaster relief.
I'm really curious if there's any kind of long-term vision for training the people on the ground to actually do forecasting, to train rescuers, or do they just plan to keep kind of outsourcing that to?
So yes, the answer is yes, there is. More so for like the search and rescues, we actually have search and rescue teams that are, Tajikistan and Pakistan have the most robust, Afghanistan less so, where they're trained from outside sources, they get trained every year, and they've come a long way. For avalanche forecasting, not yet. We're getting the weather models, but in terms of snowpack data, we don't really have snowpack data.
All the little weather stations you have, look like they're in run-out zones?
No.
They're off to the side.
They're off to the
but
side.
down low.
Yeah, that'd be bad. Yeah, good question.
Do you know what happens with the data, so the weather data you collect? Is there any way that flows back into these global models? Because these models really benefit from data assimilation.
So the short answer is no, it is not being pumped into those data models, but there are instances like there's, I forget his name, John Barton out of the University of Maryland is working with NASA looking at stuff, and he gets our data, but the data is mostly kept in-house, and because it's manual, there's a lot of errors in it, you know. It's just the way it goes.
Yeah, because I know some people who work in similar areas on snow, and their main concern is, we have too little observations. So
right.
I think that could be a very valuable data set.
Yeah, they're using it for snow depth, you know. All right, let's see, next up. We can talk more over beers, but next up speaker is Gabrielle.